Reborn first. Dowry returned. Last life. Spent all on wolves who starved me. This life. I quit. They'll die broke or worked to death. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. On a deep winter night. The window paper rustled violently in the howling wind. I suddenly opened my eyes, overcome by an unbearable sense of hunger and cold that seemed to penetrate my very bones. A sharp pain, like broken leaves, remained in my chest like the suffocating sensation of death's eve. The bed cover was still the familiar light blue. In the corner of the room, the gilded Boshan incense burner emitted a faint fragrance. The smoke curled upward, just as it had done on those ordinary winter nights years ago. I sat up, with the blanket sliding down to my waist. My fingertips touched the cool silk of the quilt. There was no dust, no broken tiles allowing air to leak through, and no signs of that dry, hard crumb of bread that had been bitten off. Trembling, I touched my own cheeks. They felt warm and smooth to the touch, with a steady pulse beneath the skin. After death, this body somehow returned to the third year of my marriage. From outside the window came the cries of nightbirds. Shrill and piercing. I got out of bed, dressing slowly as I walked over to the dressing table. The bronze mirror reflected a young face, yet overly pale, with traces of illness still visible in the eyes. I raised my hand and gently touched those eyes, once reddened from toiling for the Yan family's livelihood. An involuntary smile tugged at the corners of my lips. I didn't mention it to anyone. I even held my breath as tightly as possible, as if not even the wind outside the window could detect the ecstasy and resentment I was feeling at that moment. Qingge was sleeping beside the footrest. Hearing the noise, she groggily sat up. Seeing me standing there barefoot, she quickly put on her clothes and came over. "Miss, it's cold at night. What's wrong? Has your typhoid not fully recovered? And do you feel chest pain again?" Her voice carried traces of sleepiness, along with deep concern for me. Looking at her, my heart felt slightly sore. In our past life, she endured countless hardships at the hands of that cruel mother-in-law just for my sake. In the end, she was pushed into the well by Yan Yu to protect me. I patted the back of her hand. Her palm was cold, but her tone remained calm, without a trace of emotion. "Sister Yun, go find that sandalwood box. Take out all the land deeds and those silver bills worth 10,000 taels each." Qingge was stunned, her eyes filled with confusion under the dim candlelight. "Miss, it's deep at night. What do you need these for? If the women from the Yan family see this, they'll surely start gossiping again, saying that you're hiding things secretly." "Don't worry about others," I interrupted her, turning to look at the heavy mahogany chest. My gaze was as calm as an ancient well, without any trace of disturbance. "These items must be sent away tonight. Returned to the Jiang family. Not a moment can be wasted, and no one in the Yan family must be disturbed." Although Qingge didn't understand the reasons, she never disobeyed me. She got up and lit the lanterns, then quickly sorted through those dowries that I had once considered to be the foundation of the Yan family's heritage. There was also a thick stack of documents, gifts from my father's family, the Jiangs. Those documents were supposed to be a source of strength for me, but in my past life, I had actually used them to harm those heartless people. Every corner of each land deed bore familiar patterns. Those patterns were once exchanged for Yan Yunting's official robes and Yan Yu's fine silk fabrics. But in the end, what was exchanged in return was my cold corpse. Lying there in the bitter wind, I stuffed each silver note into the hidden pocket on my body, without the slightest hesitation. When the last land deed was folded and placed inside the thick package, I heard noisy footsteps in the courtyard. It seemed to be the old woman from the Yan family, who was on night duty and passing by. Qingge immediately turned off the light, held her breath, and tightly grasped my hand. Under the eaves, a string of wind chimes jingled in the cold wind. Every aspect of the Yan family's mansion exuded poverty and shabbiness. Yet, they still tried to pretend to be part of an intellectual and noble family in front of others. It was truly disgusting. Through the thin window paper, I watched the flickering light shadows in the snow. I whispered to Qingge, "Tomorrow morning, I'll come up with an excuse, saying that these items need to be taken to the estate in the suburbs for repairs. You should take the opportunity to leave and go straight to the Jiang family to find my brother. Tell him that no matter what I say, he must accept these items and register them officially at the notary office. Not a single item should be listed under the Yan family's name. Yungu lowered her voice, her breathing a bit ragged. Miss, if the old master asks why the dowry was returned without any reason, Yan Yunting will surely make a scene. Your time in the Yan family will likely become even more difficult. I turned my head and looked into her eyes. Filled with worry, I simply smiled faintly. That calmness made Yungu feel strangely reassured, yet also a bit alienated. Whether life is hard or not doesn't depend on these inanimate objects. I walked over to the table and looked at those old, dusty pens. My heart was already clear and understanding. In my past life, I devoted all my efforts to managing the Yan family, hoping to earn a reputation for integrity, but in the end, I became a scapegoat in the eyes of those people. Since I now understand how unpredictable human nature is, why should I continue to play this role of someone who foolishly gives their heart away? The snow outside was falling heavier. The goosefeather-like snowflakes struck the window frames, producing a muffled sound. I lay back down on the couch, closing my eyes. Even in this dilapidated Yan residence, I felt a sense of peace like never before. Once those items returned to the Jiang family, no matter what the Yan family did, they wouldn't be able to cause any more trouble. At this moment, Yan Yunting must be studying hard in his study. With his aloof demeanor, one wonders what he would think if he knew that the funding for his official career, upon which he had placed great hopes, was slipping away from him overnight. I listened to the footsteps fading outside the house, until the entire courtyard fell silent. I reached under the pillow and touched a small hidden whistle. It was a gift from my brother, Jiang Qingge. If I blew it, no matter what time of night it was, his men would arrive immediately. Yungu curled up beside the couch and fell asleep, breathing evenly. I kept my eyes open, staring at the intricately carved ceiling above me. My heartbeat was steady and strong. In this life, I will watch as the Yan family gradually loses whatever meager resources they have left, and see how greed leads them to ruin. When the first rays of light pierced the darkness in the early morning, I got up and pushed open the window. The cold air rushed in. Those maids from the Yan family, who often came to gather information, were crouched by the wall, eavesdropping. When they saw me open the window, they immediately put on flattering smiles. Second young mistress, why don't you sleep a little longer at this early hour? I gave them a cold glance. Saying nothing, I simply fiddled with the jewelry box on the dressing table, revealing its empty interior. The gleam in those old women's eyes dimmed when they saw the empty box. One of them tried to peek inside, but... Second madam, wasn't your jade inlaid headdress still there yesterday? They've been taken for repairs, I replied nonchalantly, my voice devoid of any emotion. The Yan family is poor. I don't want to see these jewels and trinkets covered in dust any longer. After saying that, I closed the window, leaving behind the figures of those people staring at each other. Yungu, carrying her bundle, hurried out, lowering her head, taking advantage of the moment when she was delivering a gift to the old lady. At that moment, Yan Yu's characteristic coquettish voice came from the main hall. Where is second sister going, carrying such a big bag in the early morning like this? If anyone didn't know, they might think second sister is taking the family's belongings back to the Jiang family to avoid trouble. Hearing this voice, the corners of my lips curled slightly. I turned and walked toward the hallway, only to come face to face with Yan Yu's face, covered in spite and cruelty. She sized me and Yungu up from head to toe, her greed barely concealed, though I could see her about to lose her temper. I didn't slow down my steps at all. Yan Yu stood in the middle of the main hall's corridor, holding a half-peeled melon seed in her hand. Shards of the shell fell beneath the corridor's eaves. Her long, narrow eyes were fixed intently on the heavy package in Yungu's arms. Even the crow's feet at the corners of her eyes revealed a sneaky, calculating look. Second sister-in-law, where are you going like that? It's freezing cold outside. That worthless farm dough, you really expect you to deliver the goods there in person? I stood still, lowering my eyelids to look at her hands, which were slightly reddened from the heat of the charcoal fire. I didn't say anything, merely adjusted the cuffs of my sleeves. Yungu stood behind me, her knuckles turning pale from gripping the bundle tightly. She kept her head lowered, saying nothing. Yan Yu, I said softly, in a flat tone, without the usual gentle words. You seem to care more and more about the affairs of the manor. What's the matter? Are the household expenses not enough, that you even have to interfere in these trivial matters related to the manor? Yan Yu was caught off guard by my sudden question. Her already sharp face grew even more stern. She took 2 steps forward, her tone growing even more acidic. Aren't I just worried about my sister-in-law? My brother spends his days studying hard. The whole family relies on my sister-in-law to support us. If these valuable items get damaged or stolen by the servants, who's going to pay for my brother's studies? Do you expect me to sell my jewelry to cover the costs? At that moment, a loud coughing sound came from the main hall. It was a coughing sound that was deliberately suppressed by Yan's mother, yet it still sounded harsh. Immediately afterwards, the curtain was lifted by a hand covered with calluses. Yan's mother walked out wearing a dark blue brocade dress that had become threadbare from years of wear. Her cloudy eyes swept over the bundle in my hands, finally resting on the tie at the bottom of the bundle. There was a hint of greed in her gaze, a greed that was difficult to conceal. Qingge, Yan's mother said, approaching me. Her voice carried the authoritative tone typical of an elder. Since you've married into our Yan family, you must be careful with how you spend your money on food, clothing, and other necessities. As a sister-in-law, you surely can't go around wasting the family's resources at a time like this, can you? I looked at her, feeling not the slightest emotion. In my past life, it was because I believed her lies about being one family that I gradually emptied the Jiang family's wealth to fill this bottomless pit. Now, her words seem utterly foolish. What my mother-in-law said, I replied calmly, bowing slightly before looking straight into her calculating eyes. It's precisely because I'm aware of the family's financial burdens that I dare not keep those documents with me. Last night, in my dreams, I kept feeling like those land deeds weren't properly secured, which scared me greatly. In that case, it would be better to send them to the estate for verification. This way, the people in charge there can sort out the accounts properly, preventing any problems in the future. Upon hearing this, Yan Mu's expression changed slightly. She clearly hadn't expected me to use this as an argument against her. For a moment, she was too stunned to speak. Seeing this, Yan Yu became anxious. She reached out to try to take the package from Yungu's arms. What kind of ridiculous accounting is this? Why check it in the middle of the night? I think my sister-in-law is just trying to hide something. I slightly tilted my body to avoid Yan Yu's fumbling hands. My gaze turned cold without showing any emotion. Cousin, these items are all part of my Jiang family's dowry. When I married into the Yan family, no pawn contract was signed. How I decide to dispose of them isn't something for you to dictate. These words carried great weight, echoing throughout the quiet hall. The kind, elderly expression on Yan Mu's face was instantly replaced by a furious, angry look. She glared at Yan Yu sharply, signaling for her to back away, then put on a hypocritical, earnest expression. Qingge, what are you talking about? As a member of the same family, we should all speak the same language. When you married into our family, we treated you like our own daughter. If you keep giving away our belongings like this, what will the neighbors think of our Yan family? And what will they think of you as a disobedient daughter-in-law? According to my mother-in-law, do the neighbors and fellow villagers value the money of the Jiang family, or the sincerity of the Yan family? I watched her face, contorted with anger. My voice was barely audible, yet every word reached her ears clearly. She wanted those stacks of silver coins, those plots of fertile land. She wanted to use my dowry to satisfy her pitiful vanity. The swallow mother's breathing paused, and her cloudy eyes moved rapidly. She seemed to have noticed something unusual about me today. This composure unsettled her, but greed ultimately overcame that faint fear. All right, You may go now. She waved her hand, trying to appear authoritative like a parent, but when she glanced at the bundle in Yungu's arms, the longing in her eyes couldn't be concealed. Since you insist on delivering it, then hurry back. There are several expenses to cover at home this afternoon. You'll need to take care of those. I nodded slightly, took Yungu by the hand, and led her past them, heading straight for the main gate. As we walked through the narrow entrance, I could feel the gazes of those staring at us from behind, like needles pricking my skin. Yan Yu continued to complain in a low voice, though her words were indistinct. I could still make out phrases like truly a wasteful woman and who knows how much more she's hidden away. Stepping out of the Yan family's gate, the cold wind mixed with snowflakes rushed into my collar. Yet, I felt an unprecedented sense of relief. Yungu walked beside me, her palms still trembling slightly. Miss, it was really dangerous just now, seeing how my mother-in-law looked. If we had tried to force our way. She doesn't dare, I said, staring ahead. The snow beneath my feet crunched with each step. Before they fully understand me, they won't dare to take any real action against me. Besides, I've given them enough to keep them quiet for a while. We rushed through the alleys. I didn't look back, but I knew that once we left this neighborhood, that land deed would no longer be a nightmare for the Yan family. It would become property of the Jiang family. The image of my elder brother, Jiang Qingyuan, with his sharp eyes flashed through my mind. He was the one who could protect these properties for me. He would ensure that the Yan family could only watch the meat they desired, never able to actually possess it. At the corner, an unremarkable carriage was already waiting there. It was sent by the Jiang family to pick us up. I pushed Yungu toward the carriage shaft, then got in myself as well. Go to Jiang's residence. The horse wheels crushed the snow, producing a muffled grinding sound. I lifted a corner of the curtain and watched as the increasingly dilapidated Yan family mansion faded into the distance in the snowstorm. The snow on the roof resembled the musty smell lingering in that family's hearts. I lowered the curtain and glanced at Aunt Yun. Leave it to me. I took that heavy package in my hands, holding it against my chest, feeling its cold yet tangible weight. This wasn't just money, it was the countdown to the Yan family's downfall. When I meet my elder brother later, I'll just say that these items are meant to be temporarily kept at my mother's house. No need to say anything else. Yungu nodded. There was a hint of reverence in her gaze as she looked at me, although she still couldn't understand why the usually gentle young lady had suddenly become so resolute. A sense of peace had taken root in her heart. Miss, what if Yan Yunting asks about this when we get back? Let him ask. I stared out the window of the carriage at the trees flashing by in a blur, my tone as casual as if we were discussing the weather tomorrow. Isn't he most concerned about that so-called reputation as a great scholar? Then let him use his reputation to exchange for food and shelter. The carriage jolted slightly as it turned around the corner. Right ahead was the spacious entrance of the Jiang family's house. The doorman, upon seeing me, rushed forward eagerly. His aged face showed a long-missed expression of joy. Second young lady, you've finally returned. The eldest young master kept mentioning last night that the fire at the Yan family's place wasn't strong enough, and he was worried you might catch a cold. As soon as I stepped down from the carriage, I saw my elder brother, Jiang Qingyuan, standing on the steps. He was dressed in a dark gray robe. His gaze, steady and firm, met mine through the wind and snow. He didn't ask why I had returned at this hour, but the moment he saw me, his brows relaxed slightly. Then he stepped down the steps, took the package from my arms. When his eyes fell on its weight, a deep expression crossed his face. He said nothing more, just nodded at me and stepped aside to make room. In that moment, that unspoken understanding between us made all the weight in my heart vanish. He was more perceptive than anyone else. With just one glance, he understood what those land deeds meant, and why I had rushed to bring them back. Go in ahead. It's cold outside. Jiang Qingyuan's voice was, as always, steady and calm. He reached out to brush the snowflakes from my shoulders. His gesture was natural and affectionate, filled with an innate desire to protect those he cared about. He led me through the front yard, not toward the main hall, but straight to the study. The charcoal fire was burning brightly, and the room was filled with the gentle scent of pine and cypress. It was the familiar scent of the Jiang family, stark contrast to the musty smell that always lingered in the Yan family's home. Qingge. I've been sending people to keep an eye on what's going on with the Yan family. He gestured for me to sit down. He placed the package neatly on the side of the desk. Without opening it, he simply looked at me with a calm gaze. You didn't come back today just for these land deeds, did you? I took the hot tea from the servant. The warm cup rim touched my cold palms. As I watched the tea leaves unfold in the cup, a slight ripple of emotion stirred within me, but my face remained calm. Brother. I looked up at the man who had always supported me. I no longer want Yan Yunting's so-called fame and achievements. In the study, after hearing my words, Jiang Qingyuan didn't show much surprise. He simply pushed the warming stove closer to me. His eyes, accustomed to seeing all kinds of things in the world, stared at the stack of packages. His long fingers tapped gently on the table as he said thoughtfully, "If we keep unpacking everything, it might alert the enemy. Since you've made up your mind, let's proceed according to your plan. The Jiang family will be your backing." I set down the teacup. The soft clink of the porcelain against the wooden table was particularly noticeable in this quiet space. Yan Yunting's face of a fake gentleman flashed through my mind. That face always wore a polite and refined mask. But behind it, he was scheming how to drain the Jiang family of every last penny. Elder brother. There's no need to bother trying to find his faults. He's too proud to tolerate anything that doesn't go his way. I got up to bid farewell to my elder brother and didn't stay at the Jiang family's place for long. The situation at the Yan family's residence required my immediate attention. By the time I returned to the dilapidated Yan mansion, dusk had fallen. The doorman glanced at me with a knowing look in his eyes, likely someone had already informed them of my arrival. As soon as I entered the second courtyard, I saw Yan Yunting standing with his hands behind his back in the corridor, wearing that faded sky blue robe. When he saw me return, a trace of unease flashed across his face, though it was quickly masked by a carefully put on expression of concern. He stepped forward quickly to greet me. "Qingge, where have you been? You've been nowhere to be seen all day. Your mother is very worried. She says there are some discrepancies in the household accounts, and she needs you to check them." He walked up to me, stopping at a distance that wasn't too close or too far. He looked at me with a concerned expression, as if trying to confirm whether I really had taken something with me. I stood still, brushed off the snowflakes on my sleeves, and met his scrutinizing gaze with a calm expression. "Today, I went to meet with the manager of the Jiang family's estate. The harvest this year was poor, so I asked my elder brother to help me by having the land deed transferred to his name for now, so that it won't fall into the hands of unscrupulous people in the future." Yan Yunting's hand stiffened slightly. His usually impeccable scholarly demeanor showed a tiny crack at that moment. He forced a smile, trying to hide his unease. "Store them here, Qingge. We're one as husband and wife. These items can just be kept at the Yan residence. Why go to the trouble of involving the Jiang family? The Yan family has had high expenses recently. I'm constantly worried that if these land deeds remain in the mansion, others might misappropriate them under various pretexts. If my brother blames me for it later, I won't know how to explain myself." I replied evasively and continued walking along the corridor toward the house. He followed closely behind me. His voice kept low, with a hint of urgency in it. "Qingge, what about those 10,000 silver taels? Just the other day, our mother said that the tuition fees at the academy would increase. If we don't have the money, my chances of achieving success in the imperial examinations might be ruined." I stopped in my tracks, turned to face him, and watched his extremely anxious expression. Yet, nothing stirred inside me. In my past life, I had been deceived by his words of for our future, and ended up giving away my last savings. I've already exchanged all those 10,000 taels of silver for provisions. I looked into his eyes, speaking in a calm tone, as if discussing something entirely ordinary. "During winter, the price of rice is high. Seeing that we didn't have enough grain at home, I decided to buy a few carts of brown rice. It's not as good as the refined rice Yan Lang usually eats, but in these chaotic times, it's still enough to fill our stomachs. Yan Yunting's facial muscles twitched slightly. He clearly hadn't expected me to exchange the money for those worthless coarse grains. A look of shock and resentment flashed in his eyes. But he quickly regained his affectionate expression. Suppressing his anger, he said in a low voice, "Qingge, how can you be so foolish? This money was supposed to be used to grease the wheels and establish connections. Now that you've exchanged it for this worthless stuff, how am I supposed to proceed from here? Does Yan Lang mean that establishing connections is more important than ensuring our family's basic needs?" I looked at him with a calm expression in my eyes. This rhetorical question left him speechless for a moment. His pretentious demeanor became even more ridiculous at that moment. He stared at me for a long time without saying a word. In the end, he simply waved his sleeve in frustration and turned to leave. I watched his retreating figure, and scorn slowly welled up in my heart. He was panicked that's because I had ruined his plans. I went back inside, and Aunt Yan brought me hot water. Looking worried, "Miss, I'm afraid young Master Yan won't give up so easily." "He really won't give up." I washed my hands, sat down in front of the dressing table, and looked at my reflection in the bronze mirror. My gaze was clear and resolute. I said nothing more, simply staring out the window at the darkening sky. I already had a plan for what to do next. Those people from the Yan family like to scheme well. Let them go ahead and scheme to their heart's content. But in this game, it won't be long before it becomes clear who the hunter is and who the prey is. As the night grew darker, I heard hurried footsteps coming from Yan Yunting's study next door. I also heard Yan's mother's raised voice, seemingly arguing over some matter related to money. I closed the window, cutting off all the noise outside. In this life, I won't risk my life again, as I did in my past life, for that so-called reputation of being virtuous. I touched the ledger hidden under the pillow. It detailed every fraudulent expense incurred by the Yan family. If I wished, I could tear away this facade of hypocrisy at any moment. I closed my eyes, but my thoughts remain clear. Tomorrow, those greedy people from the Yan family will surely use so-called filial piety as a pretext to force me to hand over my savings. I've already prepared a plan to deal with them. Yungu, go deliver some snacks to Yan Yu. Let her keep busy, so she won't keep staring at me all the time. I gave a casual order. Although Yungu didn't understand why, she still obeyed. Yan Yu is the most impatient person I know. Even a tiny reward is enough to keep her busy. As for me, I just need a quiet afternoon. Thinking of the situation that might arise tomorrow, a faint smile appeared on my lips. It was a smile of indifference towards others struggling in difficult situations. The Yan family thinks they have everything under control, but they don't realize that everything they rely on is slowly collapsing around them. I opened my eyes. The candlelight flickered, casting a cold, calm expression on my face. No matter what the Yan family does, in this lifetime, my life, my Jiang family, will never again become their sacrifice. Outside, the wind howled violently. Snow and wind battered against the window frames, as if something was lurking outside. Yan Yunting's door slammed shut again, probably because the negotiations regarding the account books had broken down. I listened to those noisy sounds, yet my heart remained strangely calm, until suddenly, frantic knocking echoed through the courtyard. The knocking at the door sounded particularly abrupt in the darkness of the night. I sat motionless on the couch, not even getting up. Yungu quickly went to open the door. Standing outside was Yan Yu. She held a cup of tea that had long since cooled down. Her usually coquettish face now showed unmistakable panic, with fine beads of sweat on her forehead. "Second sister-in-law," eldest brother said. "The rice jar at home is empty. He asks you to lend some of your money to help out in this emergency." Although her voice remained firm, it clearly lacked its usual confidence. Her eyes darted restlessly under the dim candlelight, as if searching for something. I put down my needle and thread, raised my gaze slowly, and looked at her pretended humility. I said nothing in response. "Emergency." I repeated those two words softly, my fingers gently touching the cuffs of my shirt. I just bought several carts of brown rice a few days ago. How could it be gone already? Yan Yu was caught off guard by my question. She opened her mouth, but after a long pause, she stammered. Well, that rice isn't tasty. Eldest brother can't stand it. It's just. Since he can't get used to it, then there's no choice but to endure it. Without waiting for her to finish, I interrupted her calmly. With a gaze as steady as still water, her little scheme seemed to me like a child's clumsy attempts at acting on stage. I could even sense the stench of decay in the air around us, the laziness and greed that had been ingrained in the Yan family for generations. Second sister-in-law. What do you mean by this? Can't you just let my eldest brother go hungry? Yan Yu finally couldn't hold back anymore. She slammed the tray onto the table with a sharp clang. Her face was contorted with anger. My elder brother is someone who aspires to achieve fame and success through exams. If his health deteriorates, then the Yan family's hopes will be lost. I remained completely calm. I got up and walked over to the window, staring at the pitch-black yard outside. Having lived this life over again, I'm no longer the foolish woman who could be blinded by the concept of achievements and fame. I know very well that whatever achievements Yan Yunting might achieve in this life are nothing more than a bottomless pit of vanity. Hope. In that case, why not let the eldest brother teach at a private school? It might help supplement the family's income. I turned around and saw Yan Yu's almost vacant expression. My voice was cold, devoid of any warmth. As for the lack of food at home and my poor health, I'm not able to bear this burden. Perhaps I should go back to my parents' house and seek advice from my elder brother. I need to figure out how to get through these difficult times. Go back to my parents' house. Yan Yu's voice became shrill. She stared at me intently, and the greed in her eyes was instantly replaced by panic. She knew that if she let me go, the Yan family would lose its last hope. They wouldn't even be able to maintain their last shred of dignity. I ignored her panic and simply walked past her, beginning to pack the belongings I had prepared in advance. Aside from some basic clothes, there was nothing of value in the bags. I even deliberately opened the empty jewelry box, letting Yan Yu see that it was completely empty inside. Second sister-in-law, you can't leave. If you go, mother will. What happened to my mother doesn't concern me anymore. I interrupted her meaningless threats, adjusted my long dress, and spoke in a calm tone. As I pushed open the door and stepped outside, Yan Mu's sharp-tongued questions came from the main hall. Clearly, she had heard Yan Yu's panic, but I didn't stop or look back. I simply continued straight toward the entrance of the mansion. The night wind was biting cold, making my clothes flutter in the wind. I felt no trace of reluctance. The red-painted gates of Yan's mansion slowly closed behind me, their creaking sound resembling the cracking of something decaying. I got into the carriage that had been waiting at the alley entrance. As the carriage set off, I left behind all those disgusting schemes and those vampires. The bumpy ride of the carriage gave me a sense of stability. Leaning against the carriage wall, my mind was calm. I even had the energy to imagine how the Yan family members must be in chaos right now, blaming each other for the lack of financial support. Let them sort out this mess on their own after all. When the carriage stopped at the side door of the Jiang family's residence, I lifted the curtain. Instead of the gloomy courtyard walls of the Yan family, I saw the bright lights in front of the Jiang family's entrance. I got off the carriage without asking the servants to announce my arrival. I walked alone into the familiar hallway. My elder brother, Jiang Qingyuan, was standing in front of the study, seemingly waiting for me. The moment he saw me, he didn't ask anything. Instead, he silently held up the umbrella for me. At home, I've already ordered that the supply to that place be cut off. Jiang Qingyuan's voice sounded especially gentle in the wind and snow. He led me inside. Not back to the inner courtyard, but straight to a side room in the front hall. The light from the room illuminated the paper on the windows, creating a warm and soothing atmosphere. As he looked at me, his eyes reflected a sense of relief, as though he no longer needed to hide anything. Yan Yunting is probably in a state of chaos now. What you need to do next is to make them fully realize this reality. I nodded slightly, sat down at the desk, and laid out paper and pen. I needed to write several letters. one to the academy that Yan Yunting took pride in, and another to the relatives of the Yan family who usually supported them. I wanted to expose those hypocrites of the Yan family, to strip away their pretentious facade before everyone's eyes. I wanted them to devour each other in poverty, until even their last remaining resources were exhausted. As my pen moved across the paper, ink spread rapidly across the silk surface. At this moment, the Yan residence was in complete chaos. Those maids, who were always eager to flatter those in power and belittle others, were shoving and pulling at each other outside the warehouse, fighting over the remaining food supplies. Meanwhile, Yan Yunting sat in his study, staring at the inkstone on the table now dry. As there was no money to buy ink, he seemed to have lost all his energy and vitality. In the inner courtyard of Yan's residence, the dim lights flickered, as if they might go out at any moment. From the storage room, the sounds of tearing grew louder. Yan's mother's shrill curses were mixed with the wails of the maids, who complained about having no rice to cook with. The sounds were particularly harsh to the ears. Yan Yunting sat in the study. The once neat desk was now covered in dust. The fine writing brush, which he usually cherished dearly, had a chipped tip from not being used for ages. It looked dried out and tattered. He stared at the inkstone, his brows knitted into a frown. He never could have imagined that the woman who always obeyed him in everything, even going so far as to pawn her gold hairpins to buy him fine Xian paper, would now refuse to leave him even a single silver coin. He stood up and angrily knocked the pen holder off the table. The crisp sound of the broken porcelain echoed loudly in the empty study. Useless. Can't even handle a woman, he growled at the empty room. His face, which usually wore a mask of refinement, now showed only twisted ugliness. He thought he had found my weak point, that I would spend my entire life striving for the reputation of being a good wife. But he never expected that his so-called dignity and future would crumble the moment I took away all his money. The swallow mother heard the commotion outside. With her hair tousled, she rushed into the study, her bloodshot eyes filled with panic. She kept muttering, "Yunting, that old woman said that if we don't get paid tomorrow, they'll take away our old furniture to settle the debt. That cabinet was passed down from our ancestors. How can they do that?" "Shut up." Yan Yunting's temples bulged with veins. He turned around abruptly, staring intently at Yan's mother. His voice was suppressed, like that of a trapped beast. Why worry about those worthless pieces of furniture now? Qingge took away all the contracts and silver notes. Now, the Yan family doesn't even have money to buy charcoal. Who else can you rely on? The swallow mother was startled by his outburst. She then sat down on the ground, pounding her chest and wailing, "That damned troublemaker. I should have realized when I married her that she wasn't here to bring happiness, but rather to cause trouble." Listening to the chaotic arguments outside the door, Yan Yu crouched in the corner, clutching an old jade bracelet she must have found somewhere. Her nails dug painfully into the cracks in the bracelet. Her restless eyes sparkled with scheming. She knew full well that once Qingge left, the Yan family would truly be ruined. Usually, she had looked down on Qingge, thinking she was nothing but a useless lady who knew only how to serve others. But now, she realized that beneath that seemingly gentle face lay the fate of the entire Yan family. I'm currently sitting in the rocking chair in Jiang's study, with a teacup of hot tea in my hands. My elder brother, Jiang Qingyuan, stands by the window, tapping his fingers gently on the window frames, his gaze steady, as he listens to the reports from his subordinates. A faint, cold smile appears on his lips, as if he's watching a play that's already come to an end. Qingge. The relatives from the Yan family have started to distance themselves from us, especially that distant uncle who always wanted to arrange a marriage for Yan Yunting. I heard that he even refused to let Yan's mother enter his house. I set down the teacup, my fingertips gently tracing the rim of it. My expression remained calm, without any trace of emotion. I knew full well how heartless these people were. When the Yan family was prosperous, those relatives rushed to serve them eagerly. But now that the Yan family is in trouble, they've fled faster than anyone else. It was only to be expected. Let them make a fuss. I spoke softly, My gaze fixed on the snowflakes falling outside the window. My voice was gentle. The people of the Yan family are inherently full of opportunism and greed. Now that their external pretenses are gone, they'll bite back even more viciously for whatever scraps are left. Jiang Yuan turned around and looked at me. His gaze held a barely noticeable hint of approval. Your move was masterful. By forcing them to fight each other in despair, you achieved a more effective result than if you had taken direct action. I didn't respond, simply lowering my gaze softly. I don't consider it cruel after all. It's merely the debt they owe me from their past lives. I never intended to tell anyone about that miserable death I endured. About the searing cold and hunger. It's enough for me to bear that burden alone. In this life, I'll watch as they destroy that so-called dream of glory with their own hands. Hasty footsteps were heard outside the study. It was the attendant responsible for watching over Lady Yan's residence. He rushed in, speaking in a hushed voice. Miss Yan Yunting just left. From the direction he went, it seems he's heading toward the villa in the suburbs. He said he's going to find that classmate who promised to lend him some silver. Hearing this, I gently raised my head. A faint ripple appeared in those calm eyes. As if anticipating something, I spoke slowly. Let him go. There's still some hope. Only when it's completely shattered will people give up. The snow in the suburban mansion hadn't been cleared yet. Stepping on it produced a crunching sound. Yan Yunting's long robe, washed until it turned pale, clung to his body in the cold wind. His usually haughty face was now bluish from the cold. With bloodshot eyes from exhaustion, he stood there in front of the exquisite archway, his backhand turning unnaturally grayish-white from knocking on the door so hard. I was an eyewitness to that tragedy, and the only person who knew about it. Yet, no one realizes that. Amidst this calmness, I watched him suffer from cold and hunger. And yet, in my heart, there was a kind of pathological pleasure. The gatekeeper stared at him through the door gap for a while, his face showing clear disapproval. Lord Yan, please don't bother anymore. My young master has ordered that we remain closed to visitors for the meantime. Please pass the message that Yunting has an urgent request. All he needs is a few silver coins to tide him over. He will repay them double later. Yan Yunting's voice trembled slightly, carrying a humility he had never shown before. The pride of a scholar was completely crushed by those pleading words. The doorman sneered, then slammed the small window shut. All that remained was the tightly closed vermilion door, leaving him trapped in the snowstorm. He slumped against the wall, his hands, which usually held a pen, now stiff with cold. Where was the pretentious hypocrite who once ruled the land from the Yan mansion? Now, he was nothing more than a destitute scholar who trembled with cold in the bitter winter, for the sake of a few pennies. At this moment, I'm sitting in a private room at the restaurant on Jiang's mansion's street side. Through the thin window curtains, I can see him in all his embarrassed state, holding my teacup. The steam rises between my brows, hiding the cold look in my eyes. Miss Yan Yunting has been kneeling there for half an hour already. Yungu spoke in a low voice, her tone tinged with reluctance, but when her gaze met mine, calm and steady, she immediately fell silent. Make him kneel. I set down my teacup, speaking gently. The hardest thing in this world to discern is one's true worth. He thinks that with his meager reputation, he can live a life of luxury in the capital, but he forgets that all that reputation was built on the money of the Jiang family. As soon as those words left my mouth, I saw Yan Yunting get up unsteadily. He didn't bother to argue anymore. Instead, he turned around and started walking back along the street. His figure appeared so frail and pitiful on the empty street. It seemed like he wanted to return to the Yan residence, but he walked very slowly, as if weighing every step he took. I stood up and adjusted my cloak. Let's go. We'll wait near Yan's residence. By the time we returned to the entrance of Yanfu Alley, dusk had fallen. The gates of Yanfu were slightly ajar. Instead of arguments, dead silence filled the interior. This kind of silence was even more oppressive than noise. I signaled to Yungu to stay in the carriage, put on my hood, and walked slowly toward the wall of Yan's residence. Just then, Yan Yu emerged from the side gate, looking dejected. Her clothes were much thinner than usual. Her usual silk robe was gone, replaced by a worn-out cotton-padded jacket. Second sister-in-law. Yan Yu suddenly looked up. Seeing that it was me, her face, already swollen from hunger, instantly showed an indescribable mixture of shame and anger. You. Why have you come back? To watch a joke being played on me? I just came by to see how you're all doing these days. Through the veil, my voice remained calm. Without any trace of emotion, she stared at my cloak made of Jiang family's fine silk fabric. Her eyes were filled with hatred, as if it could burst out at any moment. She wanted to lash out, but after feeling my calm and authoritative demeanor, she forced herself to contain her anger. Big brother went to borrow money. Now, we have nothing left in the house. Even the little bit of charcoal we had is gone. There was a hint of sobbing in her voice. If you'd been willing to spend some money, my brother wouldn't have ended up in this situation. Why should I be the one to pay for your mess? I looked at her calmly, with not a trace of sympathy in my eyes. She wanted to evoke some pity from me, but alas, in my past life, the pity I gave them only led to the tragic outcome of having even my last piece of food stolen from me. That lesson is etched deep into my memory. She was left speechless by my words. All she could do was stomp her foot angrily before turning and running back inside. I stood in the snow, staring at this mansion that was gradually withering away. Not a single emotion stirred within me. Then, from somewhere nearby, I heard Yan Yunting's slow, dragging footsteps. He still had empty hands. That bone-chilling coldness seemed to be slowly eroding what little vitality remained in the Yan family. Yan Yunting approached the door, his movements slow as those of an old man. His eyes held a despondent, lifeless gaze. I remained hidden in the shadows, my gaze cold as ice through the veil over my face. Only I knew about this rebirth. Only I understood the vile nature hidden beneath his hypocritical facade. He pushed open the heavy wooden door, stumbled slightly. The door, with its harsh creaking, finally closed behind him, sealing off the chaos of this troubled world. I didn't take another look. I turned around and boarded the carriage, signaling the driver to leave. When I returned to Jiang's residence, my elder brother Jiang Chengyuan was sitting in front of the hall. Upon seeing me return, he simply put down the book he was reading. Inside the study, the fire was burning brightly. I took off my coat, revealing the plain-colored silk robe that I usually wore. He seemed calm and composed, as if I had just gone to the market instead of watching the Yan family fall into despair. All of them have been processed properly. His tone was calm, as if he were asking whether today's meal was delicious. No further involvement. I sat down beside the table, picked up the brush, and dipped it in ink. With that final stroke, I brought to an end the long-standing disputes between the Jiang family and the Yan family. As I handed the final set of accounts to my brother, those conflicts were completely resolved. From now on, he is no longer the son-in-law of the Jiang family. Everything related to the Yan family has nothing to do with us anymore. I pushed the signed document toward my elder brother, my fingers steady, without a trace of tremor. Jiang Chengyuan took the document and glanced at the lines of words declaring the termination of our relationship. A hint of deep satisfaction flashed in his eyes. That night, the snow fell heavily, covering the entire capital in a thick layer of white. News from the Yan family came in intermittently. It seemed that Yan's mother and Yan Yu fought over the last half bowl of porridge. Yan Yunting sat alone in the cold wind. The family, once proud of its scholarly traditions, was now shattered by hunger and resentment. I sit by the window, listening to the occasional sound of drums coming from outside. My heart feels peaceful. In my past life, I spent all my effort trying to please this family, only to be rewarded with cold porridge that was too hard even to chew. But now, I enjoy the splendor and warmth of the Jiang family, watching the Yan family decline little by little, seeing how greed leads them to ruin. I feel nothing but satisfaction. I took out that small jade pendant from my arms. It was something I loved most in my previous life. But now, it only seemed like a source of irritation. I stood up and walked over to the charcoal fire. The glowing red flames reflected on my face, making my calm eyes even clearer. Without hesitation, I let go of my hand. The jade pendant fell into the fiery red charcoal, emitting a slight crackling sound, and eventually turned into a trace of ash.